Hi, welcome to our daily reflection from the YouVersion app, verse of the day. And today, Jenny...
It's 1 Peter chapter 4, so it's the very end of Peter's letter. And it says in verse 8, above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins.
Whose sins does it cover?
Love each other deeply.
Yes, so everyone's sins gets covered.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Love covers over,
Yeah, so I think, it does mean that when other people hurt you or whatever, then you love them back, even when it's difficult. And it's certainly a motto that I've tried to engage in, but not always successful. When people rub you up the wrong way, or where you get angry with them or they get angry with you, it's not always easy to do. But as we forgive others, as God has forgiven us, as it says in Matthew, in the Lord's Prayer, then God says, well, loving back actually deals with a lot of sins and stuff. It overcomes what sin does, which is broken relationships.
Yep. And it's interesting because this is in a list of things that Peter's put at the end of the letter. The next one says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. So, if you're loving each other deeply, then his mind goes to the next thing of offering hospitality, of being with one another, of sharing meals together and being generous with what you have. And so that's covering a multitude of sins, isn't it? If you don't get along with someone, have them over for dinner. Maybe.
Not always easy.
No.
Not always easy, right? I remember, worked with a senior pastor had a senior pastor and I was the junior one, and we worked well together, but we did have our difficulties.
It was a fiery relationship.
It had moments, and I remember walking home one day really frustrated, saying, God, why am I spending most of my time staying in good relationships with this person? Because it's hard work. And in the past 3 years before I'd been there, he'd gone through 3 different assistants pastors in 3 years. They were all around. They still loved him, but just found it difficult to work with him.
And you know less than anyone else.
No,
you still found
right.
it difficult to work
absolutely.
with him. However, it was a great partnership in the end.
Yeah, it was. And I'd made a commitment to remain in relationship. And I had a sense God responding to me when I said, God, why am I spending so much time keeping good relationships with this person? And I sensed God say, that's the job. That's the job. And, when I thought it was all about getting on with doing church work and all the rest of it, God was saying, no, part of your job is staying in good relationships. And years later, as I reflected back on that moment, I was thoughtful that we had achieved a lot, or God had achieved a lot through us. And it was because we had done the hard work, and I guess he had to do as much as hard work as I had to in staying in good relationships with each other. And I think this is the heart of what Peter is talking about here. God desires us to be a community that loves amidst all our frailties and foibles. That's it, foible. That's an interesting word. And that is often the heart of what it is to be church. And it just makes me think that church splits are ultimately the work of the enemy, because that's not what God wants. Now, ultimately, this friend of mine, who we worked together really closely for, more than 10 years, we actually had a falling out that really meant that our relationship never recovered, although we still remained good friends.
Although it was, to be fair, it was after they had left the church.
It had, yes.
So it was it wasn't to do with church things, it was other things.
Yeah, that's right. So in the context of what we had to do within the context of that church, we worked hard.
Maintained and kept that going, yeah.
And years later, a lady wrote a book about what had happened at the church during those times. And I remember her saying to me, Stephen, I thought it was all to do with this other person. And I realised what you were doing quietly behind the scenes was just as important. And that was like a little vindication of what God had spoken to me about. So,
which says that if you do the hard yards, sometimes it will end up reaping rewards. But in the middle of it, it can feel pretty tough and
so
troubled.
So love each other deeply, It covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to each other. And that's the heart, I think, of what God's calling us to do as followers of Him.
Yep. See you next time.
Bye.